At some one point I was like, I could just be the doula. Why do we need to hire a doula? We don't have much money and all that. And I want to be really involved with the birth anyway. Somebody told me, yeah, but no, you need to have your own dad birth experience. And if you're being the doula, hey, you're not going to be a very good doula because you're going to have your own shit going on. I need my own doula.
Yeah.
And then also like let the doula care for her so I can be present as a dad or whatever else. So,
Yeah, having the doula at our first birth took a tremendous amount of weight off my shoulders of feeling like I needed to know everything and I'd never done it before. And again, admittedly, ill prepared myself for it. And so having the doula there who is so familiar with birth, like what's normal and what's not normal. And so, if my wife would feel something really strong or intense happening inside her body that she'd never experienced before, that could be scary. But a knowledgeable doula would be like, you know what, that's totally normal. And then if you know it's intense but normal, you could surrender to it. You could turn off the danger, the anxiousness and the fear and the adrenaline and surrender into that intensity, knowing that's something that's normal.
You are listening to Dedicated Joe, the new dad's guide on the upending and transformational experience of becoming a father. We are dedicated. I am so excited for today's guest. He is the guy you want to hear from if you are anywhere in your parenting journey. Dr. Elliot Berlin is a legit expert on all things fertility, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, award-winning chiropractor, father of 4, ages 14 to 20, and the creator of the Informed Pregnancy podcast, plus the Informed Pregnancy Plus streaming platform that has hundreds of resources on all stages of the new parent journey. In this episode, we get into very real talk about the birth support, the doula versus dad question, what actually matters in the delivery room. He gets super sciencey on exactly how stress affects fertility and why the postpartum period is so much harder than anyone tells you. So if you're a new dad who wants to be very informed, this conversation could change the way you show up.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on this Fathercated, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, it's dedicated.
Dedicated, close enough. I first heard about you and Alyssa on Skinny Confidential. Really, another really amazing podcast. A lot of cool stuff on parenting there. And you guys were talking about the postpartum period with this time right after birth and how you plan for that. And I just never heard anybody talk about that before. A lot of people talk about pregnancy and birth and parenting. But this crazy time right after birth, it's so hard. I remember how hard it was. And yet there's so little resources for it, so little talked about. So you guys really put a lot of energy into helping people plan for that. I was really impressed with that. And so when started this podcast, I was like, I'm going to reach for the stars and try to get my favorite expert on this. I literally buy your postpartum course for any of my friends who get pregnant. As soon as they're pregnant, I'm like, you got to watch this. You got to make the plan, do it all. Super great. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And really for all the work that you do. I think dads oftentimes get left out of the whole conversation when it comes to this period. And there's a lot more we could do if we were invited in. And I think that this podcast is going to be a huge asset.
Thanks. Yeah, it's exactly how I feel. So how did you come into this? What made you want to be, let's start with becoming, I assume you became a dad before you became a dad expert or not? What brought you to being a dad or to the birth and pregnancy field?
They kind of go together. I got married pretty young. I was 22 and Alyssa had just turned 20 by a couple of minutes. We were in grad school. We went to grad school and towards the end of it, we're like, hey, you know what? This is a great time to start our family. Have a kid, and we followed the instructions, and no baby came out. And we followed the instructions again, and still no baby. We ended up going through quite a bit of fertility treatment. It took years, and really, we did a lot of medicated fertility things, all the things that I guess that there are to do because they gave up on us. They said, we don't think you'll ever have a baby that way. And they were suggesting embryo adoption or just adoption or egg donations. And we were still young, 25 and 27. And we just decided to take some time and try to heal ourselves. The process was pretty brutal. And we were run down, to say the least. So we just took some time to fix our our relationship, which had been distanced a little by the whole process, and our physical health, mental health, spiritual health. We started eating better, really spending a lot of time together, earning money and not giving it all to the fertility treatment doctors, meditating, Chinese medicine, eating better. And we weren't even thinking about kids really in the consciousness anyway, for that period of time. Then we moved to Los Angeles. We had both finished school. We were getting ready to start a practice. And, we start to say, maybe now's a good time to explore all those options, see how we can become parents. And we found out we were pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of a great surprise. And then every 2 years after that, another baby popped out. So now we have the 4 that you mentioned, and feel extremely blessed. When we did finally open that mind-body practice together, we were doing general health and wellness, but also had an eye for helping people boost their natural fertility. And I would say in the first year, maybe 1 or 2 babies came through that program. And then after that, it just started raining babies everywhere.
Oh.
And our clients who were coming in for fertility wanted to keep coming in for pregnancy, even though I didn't know much about pregnancy at all, except for our own experience. And I'm like, okay, I could do this. I'm not all that well versed in it, but I know I can help you and not hurt you. And that just became a period of intense learning about everything related to pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, early parenting, both living it ourselves, kid after kid, and also on the exploration and journey with each of our patients. And that kind of made our practice much more pre- and postnatal focused. And the information was kind of interesting that they would be looking for. Our clients would ask questions over and over again. If I didn't know the answer, I'd do a lot of research to get answers. It was before you could just AI it.
Yeah.
So as I would hear the same question over and over again, I try to figure out ways to put those questions and answers into an accessible format. And so we had a blog, and then we had a magazine that we published, and then we started our podcast, and then made a couple of documentaries, and then the streaming platform. And here we are today, living knee-deep in amniotic fluid, I would say.
Yeah. And so it's really your own struggle with fertility and getting pregnant that made you want to help other people get pregnant. What do you think, looking back, was the unlock for you? Like, was it just the right moment, or was there something physically you changed? Or
I have the theory that I go by is something that is I call it sympathetic dominance. And really what happens is the nervous system can be broken down a lot of different ways. One of the ways is you can break down voluntary versus autonomic functions of the body. So voluntary is generally skeletal muscles, the things that you think about and that you can control and do by thinking about them. Mostly movements. I can walk, I can talk, I can dance. I can't really dance, but in theory, I could dance. I could move my body in ways that I want to move it. But the autonomic system controls all the inner workings. Your breathing, your heart rate, where you send blood flow, how open or closed your pupils are. These are all things that react to the stimuli around you. So if it's hot, your body will make changes to cool you off. If it's cold, your body will make changes to warm you up. And it's same with a million other functions that are going on all at the same time. That system can be further broken down into 2 modes of operation. On one end, one polar end, you have the emergency mode, or the sympathetic nervous system, which is called fight or flight on the street. And on the total other end is the parasympathetic mode, or feed and breed, it's sometimes called. It's the relaxation mode of the autonomic nervous system. And so when you're in fight or flight mode, your body's doing things very deliberate for survival. It literally, if you're in danger, mortal danger, it wants you to run for your life or fight for your life. And so it's doing very deliberate, specific things. It's bringing blood flow to your arms and legs. It's breaking down sugar that's stored up at your liver and putting it into your bloodstream to give you as much strength as it can. Your pupils are dilated to see the battlefield better. There's a lot going on there. And it's meant to be for quick bursts of emergency and survival. It's not meant to sort of be going on long haul. And when it does, it starts to create a series of predictable symptoms. And just, for example, you don't need your postural muscles in an emergency to run and to fight. So your body takes the blood flow from there, from your neck and shoulders and your, posture, and brings it into your arms and legs so you can run and fight. But if you're doing that all the time, you're going to end up with a decreased amount of blood flow to those postural muscles. They get a little hypoxic, they don't get quite as much oxygen as they need, and they start to become stiff and achy and painful. And so you see that people are chronically stressed are going to have those issues. But the same thing happens with all the other autonomic organs. Like if you're constantly having pupils that are dilated and too much light is coming, you become light sensitive and you start to get headaches. Also, it's not a very good system for digestion and reproduction. Your body in an emergency doesn't really care about those two systems. In fact, sometimes in a rapid, quick emergency, the systems just purge themselves. You soil yourself and your body just gets rid of it and turns it off and focuses on the emergency. And so, during being chased by a tiger is not the greatest time to stop and have a donut or stop and have a baby. And so your body kind of unprioritizes those systems and takes those resources and puts it into survival. Again, if that's happening long term, then it certainly can affect fertility, digestion. People get weird, irritable bowel symptoms. So there's not really an underlying cause where you can't find anything when you do all the tests. And you get unexplained infertility. That's one of the things.
So ironically, the stress of trying to get pregnant and go through all that fertility stuff was actually had the opposite effect, like caused you to not.
Yeah, that's brutal. And it just feeds into that system, constantly pushing you further and further towards sympathetic fight or flight emergency mode and away from fertility, probably for both partners. And so it's quite possible, if you can reset that thermostat into a more normal functional area, then all of a sudden you can shunt the blood flow back into your posture and you can start building up glycogen and stop, breaking down. You start to have energy issues. You start breaking that down. Your pupils can let in normal amounts of light. You become less sensitive, physically sensitive to things touching you. And you presumably become more fertile and a better digester.
Yeah.
And so I think that it wasn't we didn't think it out. It's the autonomic nervous system. We have to reset it. Let's do yoga. It was just we were hurting and we were not in a good place. We were broken and we were trying to improve and how we were feeling. And those things in the end also naturally reshift the thermostat on that autonomic nervous system to a more plausible place, and then you naturally become more fertile. Now, in practice, it's clear that if somebody doesn't have a uterus, no matter how much they meditate, they're not going to get pregnant. It's not like this is a remedy for all things in fertility. It's a booster. We were working to boost the natural fertility that people have.
Yeah. And I'm sure we could do a whole episode on fertility alone, but what would you say is sort of, obviously stress is one thing. When you're working with people in fertility, what are the kind of general principles of increasing fertility?
I mean, I really do think stress is the big one. Nutrition is key. You're trying to set up the factory, the apartment, the studio apartment, so it's a really well-equipped apartment to take.
For both woman and man nutrition?
Well, I'm thinking more of the female partner, but yeah, it depends how far out you are, right? So sperm have a 3-month cycle of production. In the long haul, if somebody's struggling with fertility, absolutely, I think that makes a big difference for both partners. And, supplementation, it's really helpful to roll out the red carpet. So in our practice, we do mind-body work. I'm telling you things you can do at home, cardio and good nutrition and meditation. Those are some of the greatest things you can do at home to get your body into a place. Both partners get your body into a place where it's very fertile. But in practice, in the office, we do a lot of body work, massage, and there's fertility massage. There's adjustments, chiropractic adjustments. People think about it more for pain, but the nervous system controls the cell of every function organ in the body. So if you have compression of nerves that relate to the functionings of the reproductive organs, then clearing up that communication, alleviating the pressure and clearing up that communication will have an improvement effect on fertility as well. Same for blood flow. For the woman, having a really thick, healthy uterine lining when that fertilized egg comes in and looks for something to nurture it until a placenta can grow. That's something that you can help improve with body work as well. Yeah. And so in the office, we do body work.
Took us about a year to get pregnant, and we did a variety of things. We did like a spiritual thing where we like invited in the spirit of our baby and kind of made room for her in the house. And we weren't married, but my wife had been married before and she didn't want to be married, but we wanted to have a baby. And then somewhere along the journey, she got the hit that she needed to be married. I think we need to be married for this to work. And I wanted to be married. I had not been married. So I was like, I will plan a wedding. Let's do it. And she went keto to slim up for the wedding dress. And then we got pregnant on the honeymoon.
Wow.
So it was like some combination of like her being right, like she needed to be married, or maybe that's that autonomic sense of safety her body needed. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about pregnancy. A man's role. I'd love to hear about what role you played in all 4 of your pregnancies, and also now what you teach men or teach couples on what the man's role is, what we can do.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit we can do. And, in our first pregnancy, I didn't know anything. And I'm not really, if there were great resources available, I was not aware of them. I don't think I was the greatest partner for the pregnancy, for the birth, and for postpartum. I learned a lot as we started to, after the first time going through it, and as we started to work in the office as a more pregnancy-focused practice. But the first time, I was just like, I think that men, I'm generalizing, but I think that men, when a baby's coming, have this natural instinct to want to go and hunt and gather more and provide more. And that instinct kicked in really hard for me. And so I just was cranked up my work schedule and tried to get busier and busier at work. And as a result, wasn't really home nearly as much as I could have been, probably should have been. We did do a childbirth education class. We had done the Bradley method, and I also at the time thought, like, this is weird. Like, why am I doing this? This is her thing. I'll be there, but why not things that are important for her to learn about? I couldn't be more wrong. I mean, the support, look, ultimately, I became a doula, and my wife became a doula. We've been to a lot of other people's births, and, in subsequent births, we had a doula at all 4 of our births. And the doula at the first birth, it's the same doula, all 4, an amazing person. At the first birth, she was incredibly invaluable. She was invaluable at all 4, but the first one, incredibly invaluable because I didn't do the work. I didn't really know what I was getting into and how I could be helpful, supportive, and she was just on fire, predicting what my wife would need before she even realized she needed it, and already having the remedies or solutions or whatever it was that would be helpful right when she realized she needed it. She was incredibly helpful for me, just guiding me. Here's ways you can be helpful, Dad. And that was pretty awesome too, because it gave me a role and it made me be involved in a way that was comfortable. But going to so many births that you sort of realize I didn't want to be the doula at our own birth, because anybody could be the doula.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the husband. I wanted to be the partner. And ultimately what I realized is only one person could be the partner, and that's me.
Yeah, exactly.
Birth is incredibly transformative. You hear them say that a birth is really 2 births in one, the birth of a baby and the birth of a mother. And you see it. It's also the birth of a dad, I suppose, but it's just the metamorphosis couldn't be more clear as she's in labor and really just going through this intense physical and mental and spiritual process of change, of bringing this baby through her body into the world. And it's intense. My wife chose to do our births unmedicated, which is sort of a misnomer. I call it self-medicated because her body makes such incredible, powerful drugs that are probably better than the drugs that we could make synthetically. But helping her find her confidence, helping her feel safe, and being able to relax, it actually comes right back down to that same system of fight or flight or feed and breed. Like if you're laboring and the hormone that's directing the show is adrenaline, the fear hormone. Adrenaline is the brake pedal for the uterus. And its counterpart is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the gas pedal for the uterus. And so if you can have good oxytocin release, you're going to have contractions that are stronger, longer, closer together, but collectively more productive. If you're going to have a lot of adrenaline, the brake pedal literally binds to the uterus also, but slows it down, spaces it out, makes them weaker, makes them less productive. So you can see if she's in a state where she has a lot of fear, she's going to have weak labor, a non-very productive labor. If she's in a place where she's confident and feeling good, she's going to have a stronger, more productive labor. Those two hormones also do a lot of other things. Adrenaline, the fight or flight, fear, danger hormone, magnifies the perception of sensations that could be hazard, that could be dangerous for you. So pain, pulling, pressure, whatever intensity there is gets magnified many times over before it reaches your brain when there's a lot of adrenaline. Your body wants you to know that you're in a lot of danger. And so the message doesn't come in softly like a light that you might or might not notice. It's like the sun, shining on you.
Yeah. So she needs to feel safe and loved, basically. Low adrenaline, higher oxytocin. And I can't think of a better definition of the job as me as a partner to help my wife or partner feel safe and loved. I mean, that's pretty basic.
We know our partners better than any doula can ever know our partner.
Yeah.
The things that make her tick, the things that you could say, and little sweet nothings that you can whisper and embrace. Even just a little physical closeness will release oxytocin, and that has the exact opposite effect. With oxytocin, anything that could be pleasing mentally or physically becomes magnified. So if you feel a little pleasure, if you feel a little happiness, a little bonding, that just becomes magnified many times over. The same thing with adrenaline makes the body very stiff and rigid. You're tightening, you're holding your breath, you're locking your jaw and just fighting. Oxytocin is the opposite. It relaxes everything and opens everything up, especially in the neighborhood of birth and the birth canal and the perineum. They become much more stretchy and loose when you have good oxytocin, and tight and rigid when you have adrenaline. So yeah, the key, certainly in an unmedicated birth, to have a great birth experience is low adrenaline and high oxytocin. And there's a lot of things that can facilitate that. The things that we talked about.
But something I can do. Yeah. And is pregnancy the same way? I mean, the whole time safe and loved. I mean, it seems like all women
I think pregnancy the first time there's a lot of unknown, and so there's a lot. It's weird because on an animalistic level, everything's known. There's this great video on YouTube, if you can find it. It's called Risky Business, RISKI. It's an elephant in Bali on an elephant reserve, and they see that she's going to labor and they go film it. And it's the most incredible thing. This elephant is just poised. She labors by herself. There's nobody around her except these guys filming it. And she kind of does this like dance back and forth and wiggles that baby down. And she doesn't look afraid. You could tell fear on an animal's face. She doesn't look afraid. It's intense. She's quiet. And all of a sudden the baby comes out. She like bears down and pushes this 200-pound baby out of her. And then the next thing that happens is really mind-blowing. That's already mind-blowing to watch. There's no doctor, no nurse, she probably didn't even listen to a podcast. And she just knows how to give birth. And it's not a lot of intensity of no screaming like on TV. And then she turns around and it's even more incredible because she starts doing all of the neonatal care. So she uses a little trunk to sniff and see what's going on and do an assessment of the baby. And in this case, the baby's not breathing. And she becomes now kind of anxious. You can see the fear starting to build on her face. Her ears are moving in a different pattern, and she starts to make noise. And she's trying all sorts of things. She kicks the little baby, kind of like we would slap their bum. She kicks the baby, see if that's going to get the baby breathing. She's kind of moving around in an anxious way, but thoughtfully trying things to see if she could remedy the situation. Eventually, you got to watch it. She wraps her trunk around the baby's little trunk, and she lifts the head up and gives a little yank, and you almost hear a chiropractic adjustment. I hear the cracking noise in this video, and the baby just starts breathing. Now, in my mind, I'm like, how in the world does this medical doctor elephant know that she needs to go do an assessment, that the baby's not breathing, that is a problem, and there are remedies to get the baby to try to start breathing again? and figures out this maneuver, this technique, this procedure. In that regard, everybody, every woman in particular, has all of the hardwired programming on how to make a baby, how to deliver a baby, how to care for and feed a baby, hardwired inside them. And so all the knowledge is there. You're born with it. She's born with it. But we live in a world where the conscious mind, the neocortex, doesn't know anything and doesn't trust that inner limbic system, and maybe sometimes doesn't even have a clear ear for that inner limbic system. Meaning, I bet my body's really well programmed, knows what I should be eating and how much of it and when to have a really strong, healthy machine of a body. But also on the way to work, I pass billboards like this one that has a stack of incredibly fluffy looking pancakes with butter and syrup dripping down the side.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even hear that voice inside that's telling me to have some celery.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of the world we live in. So if we're not going to be attached to that inner voice, that wisdom, that innate wisdom that we're born with when it comes to birth and pregnancy and parenting, then we need to be educated. And that journey is something you could definitely do together. It could be a lot of fun to do it together, to learn and to find out what the options are and which, bounce around which options do we want. There are a lot of choices to make. And that's something that could be really done together. And in that way, because there's a fear of the unknown consciously, you could start to fill in the unknown and make it known and not be nearly as afraid. And that goes back to having a low adrenaline and more oxytocin-rich experience.
Yeah. So what I hear in that is men can both validate a woman's intuition and natural knowing and at least not question her or create more fear, more separation, and help her remember that.
Yeah, we can help her get in touch with that really knowledgeable inner wisdom. It's like the sperm and an egg just come together and her body's a factory that makes a perfect little human. When you think of it, like no human can, with our learned knowledge, with our neocortex, can craft a baby, but with the innate intelligence, she can. So I think it's a combination of really helping her get in touch with that, and for us getting in touch with ours.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we have our own innate intuition on how to be dads, how to serve a pregnant woman, whether it's our baby or some other villager's baby. Like there is this, like you said, safe and loved. It's like making her feel safe and loved. Like it's sort of like in my core, a natural thing. It's natural not to necessarily know consciously what she needs because I'm not in her mind, but I can know that I can be available and I can ask and I can be present and open, and it's pretty basic.
Yeah, and sometimes, when she does have thoughts and fears, just talking them out, having a receptive partner to talk to and sort through them, it can be very therapeutic and bonding.
And I like what you said about the doula. At one point I was like, I could just be the doula. Why do we need to hire a doula? We don't have much money and all that. And I want to be really involved with the birth anyway. And then I don't know if I came to it or somebody told me, yeah, but no, you need to have your own dad birth experience. And if you're being the doula, hey, you're not going to be a very good doula because you're going to have your own shit going on. I need my own doula.
Yeah.
And, and then also let the doula care for her so I can be present as a dad or whatever else. So. Yeah,
having the doula at our first birth took a tremendous amount of weight off my shoulders of feeling like I needed to know everything and I'd never done it before. And again, admittedly, ill-prepared myself for it. And so having the doula there who is so familiar with birth, like what's normal and what's not normal. And so, if my wife would feel something really strong or intense happening inside her body that she'd never experienced before, that could be scary. But a knowledgeable doula would be like, what, that's totally normal. And then if it's intense but normal, you could surrender to it. You could turn off the danger, the anxiousness and the fear and the adrenaline and surrender into that intensity, knowing that's something that's normal. But I wouldn't be able to tell her, don't worry, baby, that's normal. Because right. I didn't know. I wouldn't have known, especially laboring at home before going to the hospital.
Yeah, so they know how to talk to the hospital staff. They know what language to use. They know what your rights are, how to advocate for you. Like, there's so much they know. But also, she just was the only one there entirely for my wife. Like, I would have loved to say I was there entirely for my wife, but, I was also there for me, in my own experience, and my own baby, and my own fear and all that. So she was just like 100% there. No nurse, no doctor, nobody's there 100% for the woman.
That is true. And
And
also,
yeah, go ahead.
they come with this Mary Poppins bag that just seems
Yes.
to have everything in it that you would never think of
It
bringing.
was crazy.
Just anything that comes up, I got it right over here.
Yeah, here
Got
it
you
is.
covered. I remember being at a birthday one time, and they wanted this mom to be on the monitor the whole time. And they had a monitor with telemetry so she could walk around, but she was so desperate to get into the shower. That was like her happy place, her comfort place. And there was a period of time where I was attending birth as a body worker, doing massage and other reflexology forms of body work to aid in labor, but I wasn't the doula. So sometimes there was also a doula there. And this one doula, she's like a doula trainer. I mean, even this is years ago, and she was already, I think, in her late 60s. And she'd just been to so many births and trained so many doulas. But she took out what looked like the original box of saran wrap from whenever ago. And she's like, said to the nurse, hey, if we saran wrap all the equipment, can she go into the shower? And the nurse was like, well, if you can make it totally, water resistant, I don't see why not. And that's what she wrapped her up. She knew exactly what she was doing, wrapped her up, made the equipment water safe, and mom got to be in the shower, and she's so happy. The way it just changed the course of her labor. So those doulas come with the Mary Poppins bag.
Just
you never know
happen to have saran wrap.
Yeah.
Like, who knows what you're going to need. Yeah. So what do you do as a doula?
I do what the other doulas do. Look, the only reason anybody wants me at their birth is because I also do body work. I have 20 years of doing body work in general and for pregnancy, during labor. So I would say for the most part, nobody's like, I don't think I could give birth without that big, hairy Orthodox man Jew in the room with me. It's more about the hands, and the rest of me just has to be there for the hands. So I'm a little atypical as a doula. My wife is a doula too, and she's a psychologist, so she's also atypical as a doula. We're both more of a specialty doula. I'm more of a bodywork specialty doula. My wife is more of a mental health specialty doula. Sometimes she'll have clients who have OCD, and being in the hospital is just the worst possible thing ever for triggering that. But that's where they need to give birth or want to give birth. And so having a specialized doula in that case is very helpful. But once you're in that birth setting, for me, I was doing body work before I was a doula, and I would sometimes just be in the room, in the setting, doing my thing, but situations would come up where she would be like, hey, can you say something useful or positive? And I'm like, I don't know. I just rub things and crack stuff. I'm not a doula. And it's sometimes even more awkward. One case in particular where there was no doula, I came to do body work. The guy who was there left as soon as I got there. He's like, oh, are you Berlin? Thank God you're here. I got to go get some smokes. I never saw him again for the rest of the birth, that dude. And it was...
What not to do for a dad at a birth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, seemingly he's more of a baby daddy than a partner, but he was itching to get out of there. And then the midwife and the midwife assistant had been up with her already for 30 hours. So when I got there, they went to sleep. And then I had never met her before. They just called me and they were like, she's really stuck in a bad way and she's trying to avoid having to go to the hospital to finish this birth. Can you try to loosen up her body, see if the baby will come out? So I'm working with her, and all of a sudden she just like turns around, looks me straight in the eye. I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, and throws up all over the place. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Nobody else is here except for me and her. Never even been to that birth center before. And I generally have a direct return policy when people throw up around me. I throw up too. But I didn't. I kept it in. And I'm just like looking around in the cupboards for, clean sheets and things. And it was just way out of my league of being a body worker. And so I just had this idea, like maybe I should do doula training so I have more tools in my tool belt when I'm in this setting. I could be more helpful. And my wife thought that was pretty interesting. She's like, I'll do it too. And we're probably the only husband and wife that ever did a doula training together, which is, kind of fun. One of the days of training was all role playing, and so at some point the instructor was like, okay, Elliot, you're the laboring woman. Alyssa, you're the doula. I think that really bonded us in an interesting way.
We'll have to try that.
Like once I had the doula training, then I definitely, in order to complete the training, you have to be the doula, not just a body worker, but a doula at several births. And so that somehow took off as people wanting a doula who can do body work. Some people were definitely like, no way to a doula dude, is if that's what they call us, a doula.
Doula. Yeah,
man,
we'll call them doodlas. It's the new.
mandula. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so dedication. I don't know.
Yes, that's right.
So I became a doula, and one of the highest honors ever is I was a doula for doulas and for midwives at their own births, and really powerful. I mean, the things I was privileged to be invited to be a part of are magical moments that I just I was able, and also to work alongside, because I would do body work alongside some of these incredible doulas like the Saran Wrap doula, and to just see and learn things from the greatest was really a unique and incredible privilege that gave me perspective.
So cool. Okay, well, that brings us to my favorite topic, which I'm excited to talk about, which is the baby comes out. Now you're officially a dad. They call it the postpartum era. They call it the fourth trimester, this period after birth. So tell us about that. How do you rock that, especially from a dad? What does a dad do? What are the tips and tricks for getting the most out of that period?
I would say run as far and as fast as you can. Just get out of town. It's interesting. So my wife has a workshop called the Afterbirth Plan that is all about this. The period, and that's streaming on our platform, Informed Pregnancy Plus. It's a rocky terrain. I've almost never seen it not be a rocky terrain, and a rocky terrain doesn't necessarily mean bad terrain. It's just, you'll have to admit that it's going to be a bumpy ride. And if you're in the right vehicle for it, if you got a great 4-wheel drive vehicle, rocky terrain could be awesome. You can go on that Jeep tour and tomorrow want to go right again on that Jeep tour. But if you're trying to ride your little sports car on there, it's going to be a tough ride. And so I think you have to have the right vehicle for it, for the period.
Dad, this is a great metaphor for dads, right? The vehicle. So tell us about the postpartum vehicle. How do we trick out this ride?
Yeah, I think it's a time of, again, it's the birth of a mother, which is a massive change, a massive process. She has spent 9 months building up pregnancy hormones and a pregnancy body and a pregnancy mindset, and then in a day it shifts. And it's a massive shift. The hormones go through a massive change. Her body's weird. There's like a separation. This baby that's been inside her for every place she goes for 9 months is old. There's like a void for a lot of women. And the hormones cause a lot of emotion. It's all the energy that was going to the two of you, between the two of you, the affectionate energy for however long you were together before this baby came, now kind of goes down to the baby. And also there's not that much energy to begin with. So there's also that void that sometimes both partners feel. It's like, I'm alone. Where's my partner right now? And on top of that, she's going through those hormone changes, those physical changes. She's not, probably in general, there's not a lot of sleep, uninterrupted sleep going on. Oftentimes exercise is out the window, and nutrition, all the things that keep you feeling awesome, take a hit. And so preparing for that ahead of time is really helpful. And that's what the Afterbirth Plan is all about.
How do you prepare to not have any emotional needs met by your wife for a long?
It's not that you can't have any emotional needs met, but it's, I actually feel like during that vulnerable period, if you mentally prepare for it and talk about it ahead of time, during that vulnerable period, giving is actually incredibly rewarding and fulfilling in an emotional way, because Jim Gaffigan is one of my favorite comedians. He says, a woman grows a baby in her body, and then a woman delivers the baby through her body into the world, and then a woman makes the most perfect food and uses her body to feed the baby constantly. And if you think about the man's contribution to making a baby, it's really quite embarrassing. Like, you know what I mean? So like in that postpartum time, if I think about all of that, when I became a doula, when I, realized how much I truly underappreciated and valued my mom and my wife, not necessarily in that order, but that was the order it happened in. I was a kid first and a husband later. And so if you could take all of that appreciation in that moment and give to her during that time, it's incredibly fulfilling and rewarding, I think, for both of you. I think both of you. If you could have a much bigger fuse and filter on what annoys you and kind of see like the incredible sacrifices that she's making through the process, I think that it's very bonding for both of you. And, you know, when those hormones go crazy, like she would cry at anything. You know, when those hormones go crazy and the reaction sometimes, you know, if I would just say or do something that would set her off, it's sometimes a big, harsh reaction, you know, dealing with it in that moment, confronting it in that moment, just not you know, every couple is different. For me, that would be a huge mistake. Yeah. If I wait 10 minutes, we can both laugh at how crazy it was together.
Yeah, I had to get more support from friends and family, just other people, you know, just like be willing to reach out and get needs that maybe I previously relied on her for to fill that. But I love what you're saying around like just reframing the idea that instead of receiving from my wife or having attention on me or served by her, that I can get that same level of connection and intimacy by serving her, by putting attention on her, by being allowed into this sacred container she has with this little creature.
Yeah. And just, you know, sort of, it gives me an opportunity to contribute in some way to the massive effort that took place to bring this little baby into the world. You just look at the baby and you're like, wow, where did you come from? And then you realize, wow, what can I do for you?
And then what other things are good to prepare for?
So in general, I think there is this idea that we used to give birth on, we used to live on family properties in a village with villagers, and the family was around and the villagers were around, and they say it'd take a village to raise a child, and it did. Nowadays, we don't have that the same way. Most of us don't. We've moved away from the families. We don't live in the village. You know, you used to go into the grocery store and you would know the grocer, but I don't know Ralph. You know, it's just not the same. And so to either surround yourself, if you're lucky enough to have professional help, whether like a baby nurse or postpartum doula, those things can be really helpful, or to have family who's like the kind of family you want to have around to be able to help you, to bring the village back to you a little bit, could be really helpful. In lieu of that, putting things in place that are support structures for yourself. So sometimes I think even just pre-cooking food. My wife used to, whenever she would make a meal, just make a little bit extra and put it in the freezer. And then for, you know, a month, 6 weeks after the baby came, we just had food, like nutritious, healthy food that she made, but she didn't have to make it during that crazy busy time.
Yeah. Hiring people is a really interesting one. We did do a postpartum doula, and I thought it was the weirdest thing. I was like, doula's for birth, the birth's done. Like, what is she going to do? Like, we're going to pay a bunch of money for her to do dishes? Like, seems silly. But like, but you know, people said, no, you'll be surprised how much is needed. And she was like godsend. I mean, we had family, we had friends, we had support also, but even just, again, like the doula supporting her in the very professionalized and unique way was key. And even if it was doing dishes or making food or whatever, like she was able to provide that sense of stability and worth every penny.
Something off your plate, your to-do plate. The hardest part I always found about postpartum doulas is letting them go at the end of the contracted period. Can
you just move in? Can you have you for 18 years? Yeah. Yeah. So but organizing friends and family, I mean, the village mentality is still very real. People want to help, you know, like people really want to be around. People want to, there's the meal trains, make food, and they want to come and see, they'll do errands. I was surprised, you know, I read the first 40 days, which focuses on that fourth trimester. And that's what they said was make a spreadsheet and give everybody jobs, like figure out. And one of the roles that I, as a man, could do was be kind of the coordinator of service providers from our friends and family and give them jobs, and they'll do it. Or if they don't know what to do, or they might bug you, but if you tell them what to do, they'll do it. And so planning that in advance was really helpful.
I think it's pretty common for people to come and say, hey, if you need anything, reach out. But if you haven't thought about it ahead of time,
yeah,
you know, your approach is much better, thinking it through, making a little spreadsheet. That could really take whatever resources are potentially around you and maximize their benefit. And people like it too. People like, hey,
yeah,
this is something you could do to be helpful. Great, I want to help. I'm not just like giving a hollow offer. I just don't know what you need.
I mean, yeah, it's like, will they really? But what are you going to come do laundry? Yeah, they will come do laundry.
Yeah, happy to.
You have to be prepared to ask for that. And I think that's what the course recommends. Really, is making that kind of plan for support so that for that period of time, mom can really just be with baby and you can run the household, but there's so much to do. There's so much more work.
Yeah.
Like it's more than a full-time's worth of work to do. Even if I wasn't working, there's more work to do than even I could do.
And there's big learning curves. It's also just an emotional, again, probably because we're not so in touch with the hardwired innate programming. It's like if she's feeding a baby, no matter how you do, but also breastfeeding in particular, is a learning curve. Some people just latch and go. A lot of people need to figure it out, and it takes some time, and it's physically frustrating, emotionally frustrating. You hear the baby scream, you're like, am I not providing enough? And, or why is this baby crying? I wish they would just hold up a card and say, I'm tired, I'm dirty, I'm scared, you're cold. But you got to figure that out, and it takes time, and it's draining, and you're not sleeping very well sometimes, and to drain from a pool that's already not very full is extra draining.
What can a man do to help with breastfeeding?
I think there's a lot. So like when my wife would take the baby and feed, then afterwards the baby might need a diaper change, the baby need to be burped. Those are things we can do. She doesn't have to do it all. Sometimes if the baby's up at nighttime and not hungry but just up, we could take the baby and go entertain them in a different room so she can get some rest. And when they're truly hungry, we can bring the baby to her for the feeding. And again, then quickly whisk the baby away so she can get right back to bed, and we can do the other care. I remember with my first, my wife would almost always be up feeding him at like 4:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock. And then I would just get up and take him in the stroller and go for a walk through the park, and it was really great for all of us. I would get a little exercise and movement, and we'd both get some fresh air and a little sunlight. Everybody in the park wanted to come over and see the little baby, and it was fun for me. And my wife got to sleep with none of us in the house, just total peace and quiet. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot we can do to help the feeding,
Yeah, my wife and I eventually started alternating nights of who would get up with the baby. So one of us would get essentially a full night's sleep every other night. Even when she was direct breastfeeding, it was my night, I would, like you said, get up, handle the baby, change diaper, bring her to feed. It would wake her up to feed, but then she could just go right back to sleep after that. And eventually she would take a bottle and my wife could pump some, and those middle of the night feedings I could
helpful.
even do. Or even if she had to get up to pump, at least it was on her terms. When she got up, she wasn't, at the whim of the baby.
The screaming child. And then also we had a doula service, for a postpartum doula service for one of the babies that I call them the Care Bears, because each one sort of had their little belly power. But one of them would do little shoulder massages while she was feeding the baby. And I learned from that. I'm like, oh, I could do a shoulder massage. It's like a full-time job, and like they're stuck there doing it. So sometimes just being around to talk,
hang out, just chat
is helpful. Sometimes I just want to quiet, and my wife's good at telling me that if that's what she wants. Another one of the Care Bears would bake cookies, and I guess milk and cookies. So
I created the breastfeeding station that had snacks and a book and lots of electrolytes, and I would keep that restocked. Was one of the things I found I could do.
Yeah, these are helpful things that make her job easier, and again, there's a lot of things that we can't do. So the more we can be the best supporting role, the better it is for her, and ultimately, I think for the unit, the two couple and the triad with the baby.
I think bringing it back to helping her feel safe and loved. It's like my job for you to feel safe and loved, and of course, I can't control how she feels, but if my intention is I want her to feel safe and loved, and that's what I bring, there's a lot, I know her better than anybody. There's a lot I can do to have her feel that way, or if I'm not conscious, I can do the opposite.
Yeah, I definitely, as I'm saying all these things, I'm thinking back to at least our first baby and just seeing how I totally dropped the ball. And I think it wasn't so intuitive for me. I was more of the go hunt and gather intuition, and I have regrets. I wish I could go back and do that first one over again.
Yeah, I hear that. Any myths about pregnancy, birth, postpartum, anything that's common misconceptions you want to clear up?
Misconceptions is a funny word for it.
It is.
That's a very broad question. I think that, regarding Regarding birth, I will say that I think one misconception is, you just get pregnant. When you go into labor, you go to the hospital and have your baby. That is a way to go. But it could be so much more. And there will be choices, there will be options. And if you don't do any research and homework, then you won't know what they are until it's too late. So I think that where you're capable of just going to the hospital and having a baby, it could be such a bigger, deeper experience. Hilary Duff, she was on our podcast, Informed Pregnancy, and with her first baby, she's very young, maybe 22, something like that. She just wanted to have a C-section, and that is because she didn't know anybody who was pregnant. She didn't have a village at all, and she said something like, the idea of a human crawling from inside of me to outside of me is terrifying, and I just want to have a doctor do it for me. And so she scheduled a C-section, and somewhere in that pregnancy, she met with her psychic, and the psychic said, Hilary, the baby's telling me he wants to choose how to come out of your body. And that made Hilary decide to cancel the C-section and just go for the, fully medicated, typical hospital birth. And she had a great experience with it. But 5 years later, she was pregnant again. And this idea kept going through her mind, I'm pregnant with the baby, which is that as a mom now, some of the things that are most important to her in life, the moments that make her feel incredibly alive, are being present with her son. And what if childbirth is the most incredible present thing you could do together with your baby, but because she's afraid of it or not really aware of what it could be, she just numbs herself to the whole process. That kind of stuck with her, and eventually she decided she wants to be present. She wants to do this with her baby, and she decided to do it unmedicated. And then she realized if she's at the hospital, she'll probably fold and get the drugs, so she decided to do a home birth. And I interviewed her 10 days before that baby came, and she's talking about, I'm afraid, I don't do well with pain. And she's small but mighty, very powerful, healthy, strong person, but she's afraid of more of the unknown, I think, than anything. And she starts to strategize the different ways that she's going to get through the more difficult parts of the birth. And then I interviewed her 10 days after she had the baby, and she had this incredible experience. And it was what she was talking about. Being present was a whole different birth experience than having essentially, numbing yourself and having medicine do it for you. And there's everything in between. So she's a great storyteller, and she had a great experience with the fully medicated hospital birth, and she had a great experience with the fully unmedicated home birth. And to hear those two contrasted, it shows you, I think, that if you do put in a little bit of effort, you can realize what the options are and pick one to aim for. Like, I want this experience out of my birth. And I think being present at the birth really sets you up, as present as you want to be, sets you up for a parenting experience that's already bonded in a different way than removing yourself from it altogether. So I think just one of the, I see over and over and over again, people don't realize that there's any kind of thinking or planning or strategizing or picking or choosing to do. And I think that's a mistake. That's part one. And part two is the same thing for after birth. It's a rocky terrain. It's hard to think about it before you get there. Sort of like things start to get really busy during pregnancy, and it's a problem I don't have right now, and it's hard to focus on a problem you don't have. But I do think doing a little planning and strategizing there too will go a very long way to having a better experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's probably a similar question, but I always like to end with what you wish you would have known before becoming a dad.
Where do I begin? So many things. I mean, my regret is not realizing how much of a role I could have and should have in each of the different stages, especially since we don't have the village. I am the village to be supportive to my wife and to be home. I mean, I wish that burning instinct, probably when we did have the village, that made more sense. You had the whole village there supporting and nurturing the nest, go out and hunt and gather and feed everybody. But I wish I would have known that I was going to feel that way and act on that instinct. And really, in today's day and age, it's a bit different, I do have that regret. I did better. We got to have more kids. I got, not quite a do-over, but, try again. And I got better within, even then, looking back, if you put me in today, it would be a whole different experience.
Yeah. Well, now you've helped with thousands or more.
Thousands and thousands.
And dads and moms do this better and have a better experience. And so, It's a powerful way to learn a lesson. Yeah. Well, it's awesome. People can learn about you. You've got this Informed Pregnancy Plus. It's like a streaming service and an app. So, they can search for that. They can download the app.
Netflix or Hulu for
all
pregnancy,
things,
birth, postpartum, and parenting.
It includes, you also stream a postpartum dad class called WTF, which is a great name.
Welcome to Fatherhood.
Welcome to Fatherhood, WTF. That is really one of its kind. Like, I've not seen a class like that. I've been watching those segments. That seems super cool. So we'll put links to that in the show notes. The afterbirth plan, like I said, it's also hosted on there. Really great resource for planning postpartum. Makes a great pregnancy gift. And,
along the lines of some of the things that we talked about here, there's what I think is a great documentary on there called Orgasmic Birth, which is a clickbait title for oxytocin-rich birth. So if you want to see what that could look like and what that experience might be, it's a great film to watch. Another film is called These Are My Hours. A lot of people love The Business of Being Born by Ricky Lake. We have about 30 plus documentaries on their web series. You talked about postpartum. We have a brand new web series that's coming out soon called The Fourth Try, which is all about mind, body, spirit healing after the baby comes. So we've got a lot of great stuff coming out all the time.
Can't wait for that one. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the work you do, all the lives you've touched, my friends who made their postpartum plans because of your work, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the work that you're doing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. And everybody, stay dedicated.